What the Tech is sponsored by Hover.com. Domain names made simple. Go to gfq.hover.com and get 10% off your entire purchase.
What the Tech?
Welcome, everybody, to What the Tech. I am Andrew Zarian, broadcasting from New York City, and I am joined by Paul Thurrott in Gush Katif, Gaza, in a bunker, in an undisclosed bunker. How you doing, Paul?
Good.
Anything to report?
About what?
I don't know. What's happening in the Gaza Strip? It looks like you're like
quiet.
You're like in a bunker right now.
I am.
As
I said on Facebook, I am in an undisclosed location.
Yeah. Paul is remote, and you know what? Your bandwidth is pretty good today, Paul. I have to tell you.
Yeah, this place I'm in, whatever it is, has a wired internet connection. So
yeah, it sounds good and looks good.
Yeah.
So this is the show where we talk about tech. We don't necessarily run down tech news. We just talk about certain topics that we like. If you are in our chat room, I encourage you to change your nickname to whatever you see fit. You can do that by clicking on menu and change nickname. If you're watching on any number of our partnership sites like Stickam, Ustream, Justin TV, be sure to go to gfqlive.tv and join the chat there. Paul, our schedule's been a little wacky the last couple of weeks, but we are back to our normal schedule right now at Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Last week, you joined me on Friday on Tech News Weekly, and I got a bunch of emails telling me, Andrew, you are wrong. You put the wrong lower third up.
Nice.
And I said, no, it was the right lower third, just the wrong people.
Right.
So Paul is back with us now. Paul, we can't talk about where you are, of course, but a lot of exciting stuff happening.
That's what I'm told.
A lot of exciting stuff tomorrow. Well, Mobile World Congress is happening right now for cell phones, but the big story, I guess, is, and this is going to be big for the next couple of weeks, Microsoft is, I guess, unveiling their beta of Windows 8 tomorrow.
Yep.
I'm sure you're going to be up early, getting as much information as you can and starting to write the blog as much as you can. But
yeah, I'm going to start that tomorrow.
yeah, you're not going to do anything now, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, tomorrow you'll wait till about an hour before, and then you'll start doing it. But a very exciting time for Microsoft, and very exciting time for people who like Microsoft.
Yeah. I'd have to really think about the dates on this and stuff, but I mean, it's been almost 10 years since anything really, truly exciting has happened in the Microsoft sphere.
You think this is at least 10 years? Really? You wouldn't consider Windows 7?
Almost 10.
You wouldn't consider Windows 7 like a big, well, yeah, I guess
No,
right.
I think we need to put Windows 7 in perspective. You know, in fact, I had this conversation with people I can't tell you about just recently, but the way this works out is that Windows Vista was perceived to be this big disaster. It wasn't really as bad as people ever said it was, but it gave that kind of perception stink to Microsoft, and it was something they needed to recover from.
But do you feel that it had a stink because it wasn't that good, or do you think it was this weird perception of Microsoft because they failed to give you what we had initially thought with Longhorn?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, obviously they failed to deliver on the Longhorn vision in many key ways, but on the other hand, they really did a thorough overhaul of the foundation of Windows, which was a really big bet on their part and something they didn't get a lot of credit for, and something that led directly to them being able to do Windows 7 and then Windows 8. And Windows 7 was nice. Obviously, it is nice.
Yeah.
But it was just a cleaning up of what came before. So, it was competent and the right thing to do. But the reaction to it was sort of overly positive in the same way that the reaction to Vista was overly negative. That I think people overreacted to what had been accomplished there. So that in turn, makes Windows 8 even more of an impressive feat, because it's the same team.
But Paul, if in hindsight, Windows Vista was not all that awful. I think they got their act together by, SP2.
Yep.
They fixed a lot of the issues that people were initially having, but it didn't matter at that point. You could have given them Windows 7 and said it was Vista, and they would say it's awful.
Right, and on the conversely, they actually did market tests where they gave people Vista and said it was something else, and people loved
Oh,
it.
oh, what was the name with
Uh,
an M?
Project Mojave.
Mojave. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate. Unfortunately, the way it is for Microsoft, they're never going to please everyone. They're always going to disappoint people, no matter what they do, and it's kind of a tough thing. It shows you how big Windows is. Microsoft says that there are, I think it was 1.3 billion active Windows users at last count. It's a big market, diverse market. There's a lot of different personality types to please there, and they're never going to do it for everybody.
Any reason why they're not streaming it tomorrow? Because I would imagine it's a big thing, big conference, a big event.
I'm not actually sure that it's a big event. I mean, other than the fact that it's obviously big from a milestone perspective. My understanding of the event tomorrow is that there'll be an overview of what's changed, what's new in the new release and so forth. But it's essentially a press conference or the type of thing that they would have for reviewers, kind of an overview with a stage where people stand up there and talk about what has changed. So, I mean, it's not. I'm not sure how interesting it is to the outside world, to be honest, other than the fact that they're marketing it as a consumer release, right, as a consumer preview, which is sort of an indication that it has reached some stage.
So what is this equivalent to? I mean, if you went back 10 years, is this like an RC?
No, it's a beta.
It's still a beta. But it's not the betas that we used to get. I mean, it's more like a complete beta.
Yeah. They've fine-tuned the process under Steven Sinofsky, so the way that they do these things now is they have one pre-beta milestone. They have a beta, they have a release candidate, and then they have the final release. So this happens to be the beta, and it is not quite feature complete, but it's going to be very close to feature complete. So a much close, more final look at what this thing's going to be like.
Has there been any information on how they're going to do the release of the beta?
Not publicly, no.
Okay. Because I can't even remember how they did 7 at this point. I remember it was a pain to download because you couldn't. It was maxed out, and many people did it. But so tomorrow, hopefully, we're gonna get our hands on it. But
yep.
This is really make or break for this transition to one unified operating system.
Yeah.
And we've spoken about it a lot, and I don't want to really dwell on it too much, but I'm wondering how nervous they are to see how this is perceived by the mainstream. I know we got our hands on the consumer preview, and I don't think it did it justice. I think this version now that we're going to see is going to be far more complete than what we have seen.
Yep.
What are people going to say, and what is the average person going to say? I'm curious if they're nervous about the average person.
There are always going to be like the tech haters out there, right, who are never going to give Microsoft credit for ever doing anything right, and will punch holes in things and try to pick it apart and so forth. I think the fundamental dilemma of Windows, I keep calling it Windows 98 for some reason,
Windows
8 is that it is going to offer 2 user interfaces. One that is very much tailored for touch interfaces and one that is more appropriate for keyboard and mouse. Not that both don't work with either, but it is going to have both UIs. And I think one of the big misconceptions about Windows 8 is that this is going to be the first step toward Microsoft getting rid of the desktop, and that this is the only future. And I think that the way Microsoft perceives this is that the desktop and that Metro environment are going to interoperate for some time to come, and that stuff's going nowhere because there'll always be a call for professional applications like Photoshop and Office. That just really aren't very well suited to the other environment.
If in the chat they just reminded me that if you want to do minute by minute coverage of this, Tom Warren from The Verge will be at the event, and he will be covering it. And also, or what? Or Paul,
you could just tune into my website when the event starts, and I will have a deluge of content that I think is going to surprise people.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I'm very excited for this. I'm very excited to get my hands on it. I'm trying to think how excited I wasn't this excited about it when the consumer preview came out. I actually had very little interest in it.
You mean the developer?
The developer preview, yeah.
Yep.
This is a consumer preview.
So, yeah, I think speaking generally, the way to think of it is, obviously with the developer preview, the name suggests what it is and what the audience is. They wanted to get developers going on all the touch stuff, the APIs, the new things. There's this desktop environment in Windows 8 that I just mentioned that is very similar to what was in Windows 7 and is familiar and is functionally the same. Obviously there are improvements, but it's basically the same thing. The new thing is touch and the start screen and the Metro style apps. So when you move forward to a consumer preview, I think it's logical to believe that they have updated it for actual use, not
Yeah.
just for developers, but for people, so that some of the complaints you could think about with the developer preview, it didn't work good with a mouse and a keyboard, and how do these two environments interact and all that stuff. I think you're going to see answers to those types of questions in the consumer preview.
Do you know what time this event is?
It's at roughly our time, Eastern Standard Time. I believe it's like 9:45 in the morning.
Oh, okay, good. It's early. I don't have to wait till 1 o'clock to start reading about this.
No, you don't.
That's great.
In fact, I recommend maybe visiting my site at exactly that time, and then
yeah.
again for the next 20 minutes. So, just speaking roughly, would be a good thing to do tomorrow.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of speculation on how the process is going to go. But one thing I wanted to run by you, and I'm sure you deal with this a lot, is that you get news from people.
Yep.
How do you determine what's credible and what's not? And the reason why I'm asking you this is because this morning, if you looked at every one of these tech sites, they said that the iPad event is going to be held in New York. 20 minutes after that came out, Apple released that it's in San Francisco.
There's a related story that actually throws this for an even bigger loop from my perspective, because I don't know who. Actually, maybe you can tell me who broke the story that that's what was going to happen. Who said that the iPad event would be in New York?
I believe CNET said it, and I believe Engadget. I mean, all of them. I don't know who said it
Well,
first
because
nobody.
blogs.
Yeah,
Right.
a lot
So
of
to
these.
me, those people are not credible. So that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But this morning, there was also a story by Reuters, who, by the way, is incredibly credible, that Microsoft was, according to two of their sources, they said, was suing Google for antitrust violations in the EU over Google Plus. Now,
Yeah.
that's an incredibly credible story, as I said, and I wrote a story about it. Now, of course, I'm not perfect, but I mean, you try to do this the right way. So I'm just gonna bring up my site and see what it says.
I mean, if
But
Reuters is stating it, or AP,
yeah, I believe this was Reuters. Let me just make sure. But
yeah.
there were two stories. Facebook and Yahoo was New York Times. So the way I wrote the story was that Microsoft allegedly issues antitrust complaint against Google. Right? That was the way I wrote it. I mentioned that a report claims that the software giant has lodged another complaint against its online competitor. This new complaint allegedly centers on Google's copycat social networking service, Google Plus. Well, guess what? This isn't true. Microsoft came out later today and said, we're not doing that. Now, that's Reuters, right? So normally I would just accept what they said at face value. I found it kind of interesting that this was the only source for the story, and that since it had been first reported, there were nothing but copycat follow-up stories. So I wrote it the way I wrote it. People who write blogs and things like that don't tend to think like that. And so something gets reported anywhere, no matter who they are, and it becomes a fact, and then everybody just sort of repeats it.
But here's
And
the
I
thing
try
about
not to get into that. I mean, obviously, you make mistakes, but
I'm sure it happens, more often than not for many of these sites. But how
Yep.
do you? And I've
How do
always
I do
wondered
it?
this.
Yeah.
Like you look at like the Wall Street Journal, which is a credible
Yep.
source, is wrong so often about these things.
Sure.
And before, when I used to get these stories, for someone that side of technology, like my wife's grandfather, he always reads the Wall Street Journal. He would say like, "Oh, the Wall Street Journal said blah blah blah." I'm like, "Oh, don't listen to that."
Yeah.
So
Well,
if you can't take the Wall Street Journal seriously, or you can't take Reuters, seriously for a lot of these stories, how do you?
Well, okay, but the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or Reuters or Associated Press or any other news source that I would consider to be fairly credible, even when they write a story, an originally sourced story based on people who want to be anonymous, they will say they won't write Apple is having an iPad event in New York. They will say according to two sources who wish to remain anonymous and yet have strikingly identical stories, we have been told that Apple will supposedly have their iPad 3 event in New York, not in the San Francisco
Yeah,
Bay
and many of
Area.
the tech blogs grab
That's
them.
the way they'll write it. The
Yeah.
problem with the tech blog stuff is that these people don't have those kind of skills. That
Yeah.
they don't understand that they need to write it that way. So it becomes a fact. It just comes out as this is happening. A lot of people that will pick up that story won't even credit the original source. They won't say, CNET reported this. They'll just say, oh, this is happening. Now it's a fact.
Now it's a fact, so I don't have to give them credit. It's amazing to me. But there was a big confusion this morning on where it's going to be, and I was wondering, I'm like, why would they do it in New York? I mean, the Verizon event they had in New York, but why would they do an unveiling of a new device in New York? And I guess the way they justified it is because it's LTE, but LTE is on AT&T as well. It's not a Verizon thing.
Yeah, but maybe it works really well in New York or something.
Maybe.
You want to be in a venue where it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense too, maybe. But they are saying it's in San Francisco, not New York, for this Apple event. And it got me thinking, this happens a lot. And it's almost like the rumors make the story more than the actual story. We'll speculate, and these blogs will speculate for weeks and weeks and weeks about a device, and they're, 60% of the stuff that they have speculated is wrong.
Unfortunately, they ruin it. A lot of the times, the more you speculate, the crazier the stories get, and the more advanced this device becomes. So that when the actual device appears, you're like, this is nowhere near as exciting as all that speculation. It's kind of a weird thing that feeds on itself.
Well, the iPhone event, the last iPhone was, that's a perfect case of it. We were speculating it's going to be this radical new design. It's going to have this almost like this teardrop thing going on
Which
the
would have
back.
been beautiful. I would have loved to have owned a phone like that.
Yeah, unfortunately. Or, you know what, Paul? They are so good at the Wall Street Journal and every other news organization at these rumors that they know what's happening a year before it happens. Look at the Verizon story, right? The Wall Street Journal, AP reported that Verizon was getting the iPhone, and it didn't happen for a year. They're so good at their job.
Well, by the way, so you're being sarcastic, I assume.
Yes.
But but there is something to that, right? So, for example, one of the big things that happens in the Apple sphere is Apple will file for some sort of a patent, and people will get a hold of that patent and say, "Hey, Apple's doing inductive charging on the iPhone." The problem is you read about that story in, say, July 2010 or whatever, but then the actual product doesn't appear until 2013.
Yeah.
So some of it is stuff like that. For them to have sold a phone on Verizon, obviously they had to have tested that. And sometimes that requires some sort of regulatory filing of some sort.
See, here's the thing. They didn't do it. They don't do the filing until the day of the announcement.
Yeah, but in the case of Verizon, I think obviously they must have had devices out in the world and somebody just figured it out.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting how that works. But I'm sure you deal with a lot, a lot of
No, I get a lot of stuff.
Stories.
There's a depending on what it is. So, for example, I get a lot of information about Windows 8. Some of it comes from people that I've been dealing with for a long, long time. And I know those people and I trust them or I don't or whatever. And I pass some of it along to, say, my co-author or to Mary Jo Foley because I do that other podcast with her or whatever it is, depending on what it is, But a lot of the information I get is from people I don't know, Some of it you can instantly not trust because of what it is. Some of it you just have to be kind of unsure of. Sometimes it's something you just file away and you see what happens. And if they're right and then they contact you again, okay, now we're getting somewhere, and that's and sometimes that's how trust builds up. I'm not going to get into the details of this particular email, but I got an amazing email that described the background of how Microsoft came to do the touch-based stuff in Windows 8. I don't know if it's true, but the story is so credible and real sounding, and if you know the people involved as well as I do, it just feels right.
Sure.
Now, I'm not going to write a story based on it. I'm not going to blog about it or anything. I'm just going to sit on it because the fact is I know these people, and eventually, March or April or sometime, I'm going to sit down and talk with them, and I'll ask, and I'll say, is this, and they'll smile knowingly or they won't. We'll see, and then we'll know. It depends on what it is.
Yeah.
I got, for example, I was involved with a bunch of Windows Phone stuff over the past few months. I got a lot of internal documentation. Clearly was from Microsoft. There's no doubt about it. It was both voluminous and incredibly professional looking, and clearly was Microsoft information. And then you do with that what you will. I knew that was real. I also happen to know
Yeah,
the story.
and you got to tiptoe around. I mean, you are. It's not like you're just writing it. You're doing the show. You do Windows Weekly, so you end up having to tiptoe around certain questions and situations.
Yep.
Where you might, potentially be.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are people who don't have the same scruples. Some people hang out in online forums and they write about stuff that people are posting there as if it was coming from Microsoft. And, the truth is, because some of these guys who are hackers or whatever and sort of operate in the netherworld, sometimes they do come across, a stray build of Windows 8 or something. And so it turns out that maybe this time they were right. Maybe next time they're not right. I mean, but there's a lot of baloney, that kind of occurs. I mean, when the Windows 8 consumer preview comes out, for example, people will be able to verify some of the rumors and things that have happened. And it will be interesting to see, for people to see, I think, which of those were right and which of those were just completely made up, because some of them were completely made up.
By the way, I'm looking at the email you sent me, and I'm trying not to ask you certain questions.
Go ahead. It's okay. I mean, I can say no.
Okay.
I mean,
So the big story, I mean, obviously, is that, and this is what a lot of people want to know, is the Windows Store going to be functional?
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Well, Microsoft already announced that at the time of beta, which is now the consumer preview, that it will launch the Windows Store with a selection of only free apps, and that those apps will be comprised of apps that both come from Microsoft and also from third-party developers. Yeah. And of course, I had to remind people that Microsoft had a contest where developers could enter and win money for creating great Windows 8 apps. And I would imagine that the winners of that contest will also be part of this unveiling. And so I think one of the big news stories tomorrow is going to be which apps are available in the Windows Store right at launch.
This application of the way we do computing is amazing to me, because 2-3 years ago people said this is not going to work. Nobody cares about apps. Why? I don't care about apps. It's just like a thing that some people like. But
you mean like Windows apps?
No, I'm talking about apps in general. Even with the iPhone, when the apps came out, there are still people, and there are many people out there with iPhones that they don't use apps. They just use whatever's on the phone. Like, they don't understand the concept of it. They don't want to download these apps. They don't care for them. They just want an iPhone to have an iPhone. But it seems like we have become a society where apps are everywhere. But it's always been like that. We've always had apps. Now, instead of calling them applications,
we have, but these apps have never taken off like they have now on these mobile devices.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm sorry.
But do you think that the apps on the desktop will be as successful in the long run as we see on the mobile platform? That's the thing that.
But see, they're not on the desktop, are they? So the Windows 8 apps are running in this Metro environment and are tailored for these mobile devices. So
on the Mac, they're on the desktop.
On the Mac, they are, but the Mac App Store has done spectacularly poorly.
Not if you ask them. Because they've done millions if you add OS X, if you add Lion.
Yeah, but if you take that away, they've done thousands.
Yeah.
So it's really not that popular. I mean, these things are big on mobile devices. I think they're going to be big on Windows 8 as well, because a lot of that stuff is going to be tablets. Some of them very small tablets, and a lot of it's going to be PCs as well, and the ability to share those apps between the PC and the device.
I'm looking at
that's a unique advantage.
I'm looking at the Mac App Store. Number 1, OS X, Lion. Yep. Number 2, Pages. Number 3, iPhoto. Number 4, Keynote. Number 5, FaceTime. Number 6, Numbers. And then it's Civilization, the game.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool. They have Civilization on there, and it looks awful. This looks so bad.
The original version of Civilization from...
No, it's version 4. This looks really bad, though. It's $4.99. It's like some damn version of it. So I guess but this is where they're headed. I mean, they're getting people used to it, and we're just going to download everything from these stores.
Yeah, well, like I said to you earlier, I went to Best Buy this morning or earlier to get these headphones, and I had a conversation about Best Buy and how, back when Windows 95 was around, you used to walk into a store and buy a box, and back then you could buy a box that had floppies in it, and you'd sit there and that's how you got software. That's not how we get software anymore, and I think one of the big innovations, if you will, in Windows 8. Actually, I shouldn't call it an innovation because Apple got there first, but Microsoft has been working on electronic delivery of software for a long time as well. And I wouldn't be surprised to discover that, not counting, PC-based installs of Windows 8, that the majority of Windows 8 installs that occur over the next 3 years will be electronic. That they won't be people buying a box.
By the way, I do want to say that Microsoft, it took them a while to figure out how to do the electronic downloads of the operating system, because do you remember what that initial store was called?
Microsoft Store?
Yeah.
They've had a couple. So they used to have a digital locker thing that was at
that one.
Yeah.
They screwed me so bad. And I'll tell you what happened. I lost my key, and I lost the version that I had downloaded. I never made it into a CD. Years went by. They shut down the locker.
Yeah.
You can't get the code. You can't get the locker, anything. I mean, it's just gone.
Well, they did warn people that it was coming. But
they did. And guess what?
Yes.
They warned the email that I don't read.
I believe that was actually called the Windows Marketplace, the store. But yeah.
Yeah. So I have a version of XP sitting somewhere in the sky, never to be used again.
That's where it belongs.
That's where it belongs.
It's in a better place, Andrew.
Yeah, it's we'll see what happens with that. I do want to move on though to another subject, but before I do, I want to talk about our sponsor, Hover.com. Big fans of Paul, by the way, at Hover. They're big Paul Thurrott fans. When they find out that Paul Thurrott is on the show with me.
Belatedly.
Yeah. It's somewhere. He's here doing something. Hover is single-handedly, in my opinion, of course, and many people's opinion. You know what? I want to say that it's a fact. They're single-handedly the greatest domain registrar, and the reason for that is they don't upsell you with stuff. They're not trying to fool you into buying something. And the reason why I say that, and you're going to say, Andrew, how could they fool you into buying something? Some of those other guys, which I have domains with, and I'm still stuck with them because it's connected to our main site. When you go to check out from a domain, so imagine you're going to spend a couple, $10, $12, $13. You're checking out with the domain, and then they throw, hey, private registration, $6. So now you're at almost $20 for that. Then they say, hey, you want a business registration. I know not to click on it, but most people don't. By the time you're done with your domain checkout, you're at $30 for one domain. You never have to deal with that with Hover because they include everything in the price. By the way, someone says, I renewed several domains via Hover with the GFQ code, and it rocked in our chat room. Thank you, Tech Escape. I guess that's what it is. And that's the thing. They make it extremely easy to check out. They make it extremely easy to buy the domain. They make it extremely easy to renew your domain. And that's why they're with us. If you use promo code GFQ upon checkout or simply go to gfq.hover.com, you get 10% off your entire purchase. They do want to let you guys know that until the end of February, you can save 25% off on 1, 6, or 10 mailboxes on your domain name. You're probably thinking, why do you want an email address at your domain name? Having an email address with your own domain name makes you look professional, and it's easy to share with others. So one example could be you could get Andrew at gfqnetwork.com, and it's extremely easy. It's $15 a year plus 25% off. You could use promo code SAVE25 at checkout and receive 25% off your mailbox purchase. Or, you could always go to gfq.hover.com and buy a domain name. Thank you, Hover, for that. That was a long one, Paul. That was a long one that I had to do, but I have people.
You have the skills.
Well, I'm getting messages while I'm doing it from them because they're listening. And they're saying, hey,
we have a couple of changes we'd like you to make mid-stride.
Yeah, while I'm doing, I'm ready to wrap up. They're like, hey, try the email promo because we're doing it. It's ending in a day. So I like Hover, actually. And I've always said I don't want to take ads that I don't use.
Right.
One thing that you notice when you do web content, and we don't really do tech stuff on the network. We try to cover everything. Tech is just a portion of it. We get a lot of adult companies. And the money that they offer is good, but that's a nail in the coffin to ever leave that little bubble. Because what happens is nobody else wants to go near you.
Would it be better to take money from a company like that or to take money from Microsoft?
Are you referring to what I was accused of?
I am.
I guess to this person, it's better to take the adult companies, but I would rather, if Microsoft wants to pay me in any way to do PR for them online, I'm willing to do it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I just throw that one out there. It would have to be a lot of money.
Yeah, the Microsoft Hour with Andrew and Paul. We'll just sit there and talk about the greatness of Windows Vista.
Right.
Yeah, Windows Vista was great. The original
Why
release.
you had it all wrong.
Yeah.
I still use it today.
Yeah, look, everything is on Vista, and I
I
refuse
want
to go
something
anywhere.
that's like Windows 7, but is heavier and slower.
Don't we all? It's like molasses of the operating systems.
Right.
Mobile World Congress is happening, and I don't know what's happening here. Why am I getting messages from 1,000 people? Wow, that is bizarre. I don't want this. That is so weird. I just got 15 messages on Skype.
Huh.
All saying the same thing. That was weird. Mobile World Congress is happening, as we all know, and it's in Barcelona, and a lot of the cell phone manufacturers are showing off what they're going to be putting out to the market. It's like the CES of cell phones. And
Yes, it is.
And the thing is quad-core phones.
I don't get the quad-core thing.
Some may say, Paul, that sounds like an old guy saying, I don't understand why we need more than 4 gigs of RAM.
I appreciate that opinion, but
Yeah.
I disagree with it.
Okay, tell me why.
No, I mean, I think that there's an interesting compromise that has to occur between power and portability. And that if you look at, like we talked about this with the Galaxy Nexus, for example, you enable LTE and you are free to go for 15 minutes from your house. But after that, the battery's going to be dead. I use a Windows Phone device. Windows Phone today only supports single-core processors, and the things scream. They're really fast because that system is small and light and designed to run really, really well. I think one of the problems when you get to multi-core or multi-processor or whatever is that people start getting lazy when they write code. And I think that one of the things, and again, because I'm always promoting Microsoft, I'll just throw out there that one of the things they did right in Windows 8 is pay attention to how things impact the battery life of the machine.
So
that's half the point of Metro. One of the things that people don't understand.
Is Windows 8 lighter than Windows 7?
Yes, it is.
I saw some number, but you tell me by how much.
We won't know an exact number until the
Until
final version, but it's probably in the single digits.
Okay.
But remember, this thing is going to ship 3 years later than Windows 7, and hardware has improved dramatically since Windows 7 came out. So when you combine those two things, the net gain is fairly dramatic. And when you look at stuff like full screen Metro apps, especially that will be running on tablets almost exclusively,
and it's slower hardware. I mean, the tablets are running slower hardware than what someone's laptop is running.
But it's fine because they don't need to run fast. That's my point. In other words, when you stop getting lazy about writing code and you write stuff that's efficient from the get-go, I think you have a better overall system. It's one of those reasons that I think Windows Phone is one of many reasons I think Windows Phone is technically superior to Android. And when I look at these quad-core things, I just think to myself, this is the megahertz wars all over again.
Yeah.
It's a pointless statistic that some people it will make them feel good about.
And what happened with that? I mean, it stopped at 3, and they started adding quads.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Do you even think about this stuff anymore? I mean, I have no idea how fast the computer I'm using right now, I don't know what the speed of the processor is.
For the studio, yes, I have to know because
of course,
it's still one of those things where every megahertz counts in this stupid thing, and it's crazy to think that you were still counting that and we're still overclocking. But for the studio, yes, I kind of need as much performance as I could get out from the main machine. But I honestly have no idea. I have an idea of it, but I don't have like this like exact number on what any of these laptops are running, and that's because we have learned, and I think Windows 7 was the first sign of this, that optimized code and well-written code.
Well, it's a
goes
cycle.
a long way.
Windows 7's not the first time, but it's sort of a return to that.
No. The reason why I say that is because we started running Windows 7 on these old, slow netbooks.
XP machines. Yep.
And they were XP machines, and they were running better than what XP was doing, and I think that showed it to a lot of people, saying, wow, you know what? The software goes a long way.
Yep,
I'm talking about the mainstream. I'm not talking about us that we know. I think many people had no clue that you could get longevity from a computer.
Right.
They thought it's this machine you throw out every 3 years.
Yeah. The not that this is like world class, but I mean, this netbook, it's about 7 hours of battery life, which is nice. You can buy machines that get 12. You can add a battery slice to Lenovo ThinkPads and get 24 hours of battery life, depending on the machine. So, this stuff is being solved, but it doesn't require, and in fact, very much doesn't need or can't use a very high-end processor. You need kind of a mid-level processor that it just works better for power management.
How can a quad core, and I wonder what the battery life is on these quad cores.
That's what I'm saying. I think this thing combined with, of course, they're going to have LTE because you have to have that on the most modern
Yeah.
phones. Yeah, what are you looking at? This thing is you're going to have to tether it to like a heart monitor or something. I mean, I don't know how you would, you're going to have to like insert a power pack in your body that's powered by your DNA or something. I don't see how you could possibly use a device like this.
It seems like it's a big thing. But there's also the rumors that the next iPhone is going to be a quad core. So I don't know. I don't understand why. I mean, I understand why we will evolve to that, but I think the battery technology is a far more important thing than the quad core CPU. If they start improving the battery, especially on a device like this that you're only able to get on 4G a couple hours of battery life, and then the thing is just dead. That's a big problem, and this is a dual core. Imagine on the quad core, it's going to be awful.
Yep.
Big screen.
Yeah, I just don't think it's necessary.
Big screen, not that big of a battery, and an LTE. It doesn't really work well. But that was the thing. The other thing that I noticed, and I still don't understand why this is happening, is that HTC and other manufacturers are releasing phones not running Ice Cream Sandwich.
I just would like to reiterate for probably the 117th time that I cannot stand Android. And I don't get this market. I don't even get why this is possible. This is like someone releasing a Windows XP based computer today. It just does. I don't get why that should be possible. I don't know what to say.
By the way, I saw a Windows XP laptop on sale in CVS.
It's CVS
for $99 during the holidays. I think you're right on this. I don't know. I'm sure they have a reason. I just don't understand the reason. Nokia had a lot of stuff, a lot of news out of Mobile World Congress.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to parse all of it. One of the weird things about this show from that Windows Phone perspective is that Microsoft didn't have an official press conference of any kind. So they sort of unveiled that they're coming out with this new revision to Windows Phone 7.5 that was previously codenamed Tango, though they never admitted that that's what it was. And the point of that release is to allow it to run on even lower end systems, which is fairly amazing. So one of the new Nokia devices is based on that system, and they're going to sell it in emerging markets and in places like, I think, like China as well. And the point behind the device is that they can sell it more cheaply. The downside of the device is it's possible that some of the apps in the App Store aren't going to run on it because it doesn't have enough resources and so forth. And so it's kind of creating a weird fragmentation effect, as we call it, from the Android side, where there are going to be those that have and those that don't.
So is the on the Microsoft side, this new version, how is it optimized for higher end?
It's not.
It's
so
not.
in other words,
it's only
Windows
on
Phone,
lower end.
Yeah, it's all. They've changed the way they were going to market it. Originally, they were going to have this phone was just going to be for these emerging markets, but they're just going to upgrade all existing devices, assuming that the carriers allow it, to this version. So if you have an existing device, it's not going to harm the device. It's not like it's going to detune it in any way, but it opens the software up for even lower end devices that run under a megahertz in speed. So you can get a gigahertz in speed. So you can have like 800 megahertz chips inside the device, which are cheaper. You can have devices that only have 256 megs of RAM instead of 512. And then the software has been architected in such a way that it actually takes less of a use of the resources in the system, and doesn't take advantage of some resource types that are available in the higher end phones. So it's just significantly detuned, and it is thus cheaper for the device.
Very cool. AT&T, and I thought this was an interesting story to bring up, and we don't really like doing the stories, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting too, actually.
And I would like your opinion. I would love to hear what the audience thinks too about this. But AT&T is thinking about changing the way that they do data, and they charge for data, and they're looking at charging the app maker for data. Certain app makers, like I'll give an example. Someone like Pandora would be charged for the data that their users are using. So now if you're using Pandora on your phone, or Netflix on your phone, that data will not count towards your data limit.
Right, but conceivably Pandora is going to charge you for that.
Well,
and then you can
here's what I'm
choose to
thinking.
use the service or not based on that cost.
Here's what I'm thinking. This is interesting because one of the arguments is, you have all this speed with 4G, but you can't really watch anything.
Right.
What if AT&T says, okay, you know what? We have 5 companies that we have deals with, and
Right.
maybe they'll put AT&T, sponsored by AT&T, bandwidth provided by AT&T, and you will run those apps like, let's say, like a Netflix or a Hulu or a Pandora or whatever else, and that doesn't count, and there's really not much money being exchanged. It's almost like a sponsorship, but those are the only applications that data doesn't count. So they're saying, well, look, you could go and watch Netflix. We're not going to count it on your data. And that's a way for them to get their name out there, and it's more like a PR thing almost. I think that's the way they're going to go around it. We constantly talk about these data caps, and we talk about throttling and all that stuff. But in the long run, I think we're going to have favored companies that are not affected by this.
You have reminded me to look at my data usage. I meant to do this because I don't think I use a phone. I don't think I use a tiny percentage of the data that I have available to me, but I think also that there's a very small percentage of people that are hogging the data, right, on most networks, and that this type of thing, I think, is another attempt by AT&T to make sure that the people who are using the most data, or in this case, I guess the apps that are using the most data, are paying for that, right? And I think that's fair. We all get a little upset anytime AT&T or one of these other companies changes anything, but the truth is, these markets are going to have to adapt to the way that we're changing our usage, and this is an interesting. I'm not saying it's the right thing necessarily, but it is interesting.
But what apps? I mean, there's only certain limited apps that really could take up that much data. You're talking about.
Well, Netflix has got to be the big one.
Yeah,
It's
Netflix, Hulu, Pandora. And whatever, the top, let's say 5 or 6, but I could see them cutting a deal with them. We saw with LG.
What about like the baseball app, the way you can watch baseball games?
MLB, yeah.
People do a lot of that stuff, and the other sports apps, probably like the ESPN maybe. This is the situation that's only going to get worse. I think the interesting thing here is that they're trying to rein it in, and this is also, speaking of code optimization, a way for these people to suddenly start caring about how they consume network data, because now it's going to cost them if they don't do it efficiently. So maybe this will institute a new round of
or the other way around it, Paul, is that like Verizon would have Verizon Fios. If you have Verizon Fios, you can watch your Verizon shows, and I think they do this to some extent. And whatever you watch, and if you're a Verizon customer, it doesn't count towards your data cap.
I think that's great.
I think that's how they're
by the way,
going to go
that's the way
around
cloud
this.
storage works, right? So if you buy music from Google Music or from Amazon, com or whatever, that purchase doesn't go toward the storage allotment you have up in their cloud services, right? I mean, this is I think it's sort of an acceptable model that people understand.
You think people would approve of that, or it's just another way for them to kind of?
No, people are always going to complain about everything. That's the way people are. But I look at this and I think, without having all the details, it seems reasonable to me. I mean, AT&T and these other networks spend billions of dollars putting in infrastructure, and then it gets abused by some app they've never even heard of that has come out of nowhere, and now people are using it to the tune of millions, and they're consuming bandwidth at a rate that was unprecedented, and you have to be able to adapt to stuff like that. And I think that's what this is an attempt to.
Yeah, I honestly, I rarely go anywhere near my cap. The only thing I really do is listen to online radio on this.
Yeah.
Like streaming podcasts and streaming, online networks. And that's the only time that I would kind of come close to my cap, but it's all audio. I'm not watching video on this thing, but I know a lot of people will probably want to do that.
Sure. I think if the bandwidth was acceptable, you commuted to work every day on a train or a bus or whatever, it'd be nice to catch up on a sitcom on the way to work. If you had that 30 minutes to kill, or what, why not? I mean, it's ponderous to plug a device into a computer and copy a file over, however you would get that thing on there. I mean, if you could just stream it and it didn't harm you from a financial perspective, I mean, who wouldn't do that? Of course, you're going to take the easiest way out every time. But I don't know. I think there's people run into surprises. People who've done things like Pandora, they play it over Bluetooth in their car maybe, and then they get that first bill and they're like, "Yikes!"
Yeah.
I buy an international data plan every time I go to Europe, and I go through the same process where for the first couple of days, I'm super careful about turning off data, but I can monitor my data usage. And then after 2 days, I just leave it open all the time because I'm never going to come close to using it.
What do you have? You have 5 gigs?
The amount of storage. Oh,
Yeah.
well, it depends. No, actually, it's a lot less than that. So when I go away for a week, I usually get one. I think it's a 275 megabytes. And that week that I was in Spain, I used 150
Oh, you're talking about international though.
international.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking here. I'm trying to see what my cap is. I think I have 4 gigs on my cap, but I go nowhere near that because I never leave my house and I'm always on Wi-Fi.
I'm theoretically still unlimited at AT&T, but even with that international usage, my total for this month is going to be like 500 megabytes.
Okay, I'll tell you right. You hit 500.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now what mine is. Data usage. I have used 28 megs
Wow.
since the beginning of the month.
Since the beginning of February?
Yeah.
How? What have you not
Oh
been doing?
no. Wait a minute.
Hold on. I'm sorry. It's 2.8 gigabytes.
No, 117.
Okay.
117.
Yeah. So you're like you don't leave the house, is what I'm
No,
hearing.
no, I go nowhere.
Yeah. So,
I go
yeah,
nowhere.
mine goes up when I travel, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I work at home, so usually I'm putzing around the neighborhood at best, so I don't really use a lot of data.
This is interesting. Something's been using up all my data the last couple days. Oh, Stitcher has been. I use it all with Stitcher because I probably let it run and I didn't even know I was running Stitcher. That's interesting. I don't know. I think this might be the answer, but if they do charge the companies, then that means a lot of these free apps are no longer going to be free apps.
Right. But
So how much can
in
how
some
much can they
ways-
theoretically charge you to kind of
well,
make it worth it for them?
how weird is it that I'm trying to think of an analog in the PC world. You write an app that requires you to be getting bandwidth from a company, so you can write it to do whatever, and then you don't have to worry about the usage. I mean, I think there's an honesty to requiring these companies to at least think about that stuff. And then, in the case of something like Pandora, where, hey, look, people using the free service and are streaming this thing for X amount of hours every month. I mean, maybe they should be paying for that.
Yeah, but what can they possibly charge? That's the
Right.
that's the thing. What are they going to possibly charge that makes it fair? Are you going to have these application, companies charging you $10 for something that they normally would have charged you for free?
I'm actually kind of surprised that AT&T doesn't do something where they just charge the user for particular apps, or app types. I mean, if they go over a certain bandwidth allotment or something, where you are using what is known to be a high risk or high use of bandwidth type app, and maybe there's a surcharge for that. I mean, it seems like that'd be a more direct way to do this, but I think it's reasonable. I think the problem is that they're not so much fighting the apps we have today, but they can already see what's happening with some of those apps that we mentioned, and who knows what the next generation of these apps is going to be like on data. So
I'm
I think
looking
they're just
here.
trying to rein it in.
I'm looking here, and I got this email from somebody, and we were talking about last week. I think you mentioned it, or I said on Twitter that Microsoft is dropping the Live name, and they're calling it Microsoft.
Well, potentially, yeah.
Potentially, and I've always wondered. I personally don't like the Hotmail name.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Why don't they just stick to Bing?
A lot of people have said that too. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what to say about the brand stuff. I actually like, for example, the Zune brand, which is also going away. I like the look of the logo. I think the name is good. There are rumors right now that Microsoft will be unleashing some other music service sometime this year.
Oh, so
I think
does
it's
that
more
mean
likely
that's
going
going
to rebrand.
Oh, they're going to rebrand the Zune brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how it's going to really go down.
Yeah,
But
because the player's not bad. I mean, like
Yeah.
iTunes, you could get everything in iTunes, but Microsoft with Windows, you really haven't been able to do that. You have to kind of download Zune separately, and a lot of people don't know to do that.
yeah, and no doubt that's changing in Windows 8. But um, I think the issue is that maybe Microsoft has too many of these brands. Windows Live and Zune and Xbox, and people don't understand what the relationship is between Windows Live and Windows, and do I have it? Is it part of Windows, or do I have to go get it, or does it come with a PC? I mean, how do you get things like that? And I just think it's maybe adding to the confusion. The part of Microsoft that makes Windows today is oddly enough is called the Windows and Windows Live division. Um, why is that? I've been saying this for years. I mean, they have these Windows Live apps, so they have all these ponderous names like Windows Live Photo Gallery. Why isn't that thing just called Photo Gallery? Like what Windows Live? Who cares?
Well, Windows Live Essentials.
Yeah, well, which is that? That's what that is part of.
Yeah,
like
part
why?
of.
Just get rid of that. That seems dumb to me.
Yeah, that is interesting. Why they? I mean, branding has never been their.
No.
They're positive. Part of what they do. They've always had a difficult time branding it. So why don't we do a few Q&A stuff, a few questions for Paul before we wrap it up for today.
Like 13 no comments in a row.
Yeah, no comment. I'm just going to go down the list of messages that I've had in my inbox for you. But if you want to submit a question, you could ask in the chat room at jfqlive.tv. Submit your question there to make it a little easier for me so I don't have to go running around to find this. Andrew, ask if the beta has to be a clean install or upgrade on top of the developer preview. I would imagine it would be a clean install, right? Huh.
Well, I don't think I can answer that one. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if I rephrase it a little, would that work?
Yep.
If I don't have developer preview, do I need developer preview to install it?
No.
Okay, that works.
I just as a general rule, I would say that it's never reasonable to expect any beta milestone of a Windows OS to upgrade to another beta milestone. It has happened occasionally, but it's very rare and certainly not supported. And I think you can expect that to be the situation for this version.
Josh wants to know, what is the end game for Android makers with so many phones coming out constantly? Well, what is the end game? I could probably take that. They want to make as much money as possible, and they want to saturate the market and make it into a numbers game. Google wants to be able to go and say, we're the #1 manufacturer of phones.
Well, they are.
Which they are. That's
we
what they want.
complain about this fragmentation stuff, but the one thing I just want to keep reminding people is, guess what? They're #1. So, we can point out the error of their ways all we want, but these things keep selling in record numbers. I don't remember the exact figure that was provided yesterday, but aren't they activating something like 850,000? What was
850,000 phones per day.
Per day?
Yeah.
Almost 1 million a day.
I think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I thought it was something like that. So it's guess what? They're winning.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why. I mean, we know the saturation sucks for many people if you're buying a phone, and I think for overall the perception of the operating system gets hurt in the long run because you have all these different phones running all different versions, and they all have different kinds of add-ons on top of them and branding on top of them. So it kind of hurts it, but in the long run, that's not their concern. They want the market share, and they want to sell as many phones as possible. That's how they win.
From a sort of a run rate perspective, 850,000 units a day is significantly higher than the number of units of Windows that Microsoft sells in a day. Somewhere it's probably somewhere in the 650 to 680,000 range. So they're doing something right.
Yeah. Let's see here. I'm trying to go in order, guys, and my eyes are bad, so I can't really see this. Oh, this is a good one, and I don't know if you probably can't answer this, but will Windows 8 be able to be installed via thumb drive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. I cannot see it. Microsoft announced Skype for Windows Phone coming in April. Will that drive the carrier total? I got to see this. Hang on. Sorry. Oh, my God. My eyes are so bad. I can't see the laptop. Microsoft announced Skype for Windows Phone coming in April. Will that drive the carriers totally crazy and not sell the devices?
I've never quite understood the excitement over Skype for Windows Phone. And if you've looked at the beta, you realize it's not all that fantastic. It's a standalone app, but it doesn't multitask really, so it doesn't run in the background. It doesn't support background services. So it's not a phone replacement, not yet anyway. Certainly not on Windows Phone. So maybe in the future we'll see better integration with the OS, and maybe it will become a better experience. But Windows Phone sells in such low volumes right now. I don't think carriers really care about this. I mean, I think they're more concerned about it on iPhone or Android than they would be on Windows Phone.
Okay. What does Paul think of the Nokia Clearview and the new camera phone? Is this the 42 megapixel phone?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like it's almost like a technology demo, isn't it?
Yeah.
I assume they will be hoping to get that into Windows Phone at some time in the future, but I think it's like when a car maker comes out with some supercar that they race around and to show off their mechanical engineering skills, and then eventually some of that technology makes its way into mainstream cars. So
Oh, it has, because it has true zoom rather than optical. That's the big deal.
Yeah, it's like 4 inches thick though too. It's like a camera. It's
Yeah.
a camera that also makes phone calls apparently.
But maybe for somebody it might be something they're interested in.
Yep. But I think really they were just showing it off to say, hey, look, we haven't stopped innovating. We're working on stuff that's cool. I think it was essentially a tech demo.
I'm trying to see this thing now. Well,
it's awful looking.
Yeah, this thing is awful looking. But eventually, I mean, that's going to have to be. They're going to have to put true zoom into this thing because optical is just awful. Not digital is awful. Optical is what you want.
Maybe the short-term solution for this stuff is what you see on the iPhone, where third parties have made those lenses that you can attach to the iPhone camera, and the iPhone camera itself is very decent for that kind of a device. But then you add these lenses, and so for those rare times when you're on a vacation or something, you cart around this thing, it's a little more awkward to carry, but you can take nice photos with it, zoom in, and do all that stuff.
By the way, it's PureView.
PureView.
Yeah, this is a camera. That's just the phone.
Yeah.
What are you playing on Xbox? That's a
I only play one game on the Xbox, and currently that is Modern Warfare 3.
I just shut down my computer by mistake. I just put it to sleep. Let me pull it up here. I don't think you can answer that question. If you have, I guess I'll ask it, but you could deny yes or no. Has Paul seen Windows 8 running on a phone? I guess Windows Phone 8.
Yeah. No, I can. No, I have not.
Okay. We'll do 3 more, and then Paul has to leave because he has a busy schedule. Trying to. I think that was it. What time is the link hitting for Windows 8?
Like the download?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would imagine it's right after or during the announcement. I mean,
yeah,
that's
I think it's okay to say that they'll say that tomorrow.
Yeah.
They'll say what it is tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
And that's it. I guess that's it. That's what we'll do. Nobody had questions for me. Nobody had hair questions. I'm really upset at that. I was hoping
Andrew,
someone.
What kind of product do you use?
Well, Paul, if you're gonna ask, I use a wax from Israel that my barber gets imported, and it's not a pomade. It's not wax. It's not oily, and that's what I use. And then I use a little hairspray on top of that.
I'm a little alarmed. You were so ready with that answer.
Oh, I answer that question all the time. Actually, people ask me what kind of product I use, thinking it's some special product, and they're right. It is special product.
It is special.
Yeah. All right, Paul. I'll let you go.
Thank you, sir.
You are a busy man. Tomorrow you're going to be even busier. So I encourage
tomorrow
everybody.
It's going to be just
crazy.
Hoping to God my site stays up. But I just to reiterate, I can't overstate enough that there will be a lot of information.
One last question, Paul. If you were a tree, what type of tree would you be?
Wow,
it's a tough one.
That would be the Anne Frank tree.
A weeping willow.
Right, there you go.
I would be a weeping willow. But be sure to go to Paul's website tomorrow morning at winsupersite.com for all things Windows 8, I guess. It's going to be a very fun day. I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait to get my hands on Windows 8. Paul, would you say that it's fine to install this on a netbook, on a slower netbook?
Actually, that's an interesting gray area because netbooks typically run at like 1024 by 600, which is actually below the minimum requirement for Windows 8.
Okay.
So Steven Sinofsky had made a big deal at the initial Windows 8 unveiling of showing, hey, look, this thing runs not just pretty well on a netbook, but actually runs better than Windows 7 did. But I don't believe that's going to be possible. So I don't actually know.
Huh.
But I do know that the Windows 8 system requirements include a resolution of 1024 by 768 or higher. So it's likely that most netbooks won't run it.
What does it require again? I'm sorry. I'm going to look at my.
Well,
resolution.
1024 by 768 is the minimum. If you want to do the side-by-side multitasking feature, you need 1366 by 768 or higher.
So this is 1024 by 600.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, so it may not work.
Oh, very interesting. All right, Paul. Also, go to our website, guysfromqueens.com, for all our shows. If you missed any portion of this, you can download it on iTunes, on the Zune, on Stitcher, pretty much everywhere you can imagine. And we should have it up there by tonight, actually. Also, go to gfknetwork.com. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/Andrew Zarian. You can follow Paul at Thurrott. He is at Thurrott. And we'll see you all next week on What the Tech. Good night, everybody.